Hello and welcome to an episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today, I'm a little late to the party, but I'm going to be doing an episode on the new SH MonsterArts figures that have been announced. And these figures, incidentally, reveal the designs of the Kaiju in Godzilla King of the Monsters, the upcoming 2019 film. So I'm going to be going through and just giving you my thoughts and feelings about the redesigns they've done to Godzilla, as well as the designs they've come up with for the other three kaiju, that being Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. So let's get started. So to begin with, this is our new redesign and new figure for Godzilla 2019. So basically, off the bat, you can see it is still pretty close to the 2014 design, but I'm so happy with some of these changes they've done here, because they have done some pretty major changes, particularly with the spines and the feet. It's, great to see these changes, because even though the spines, particularly for me, were just a minor thing that I didn't like fully about this design. I mean, there's a lot I could say about the design originally, my original sort of interpretations of it, which I will actually sort of cut short in this video, because I am going to put out a video shortly about my general impressions of the 2014 design and why I have some issues with it. But for this video, I'm just going to be talking about the updates they've done to this one, just to keep it a little, keep all that content for that other video. So if you are interested, keep a lookout for that video coming up. But yeah, what they've done is, first of all, the biggest change they've done to the design is they have updated the spines. And for those of you who, know your Godzilla stuff, which I'm assuming most of you do if you're watching this channel, you can tell that they've heavily inspired these new spines by the 1954 original Godzilla design, which is really cool to see here. Especially these 2 or 3 around the back area here. Just they have that classic shape that you only really saw on the 1954 and subsequently the 1955 or 6. Whenever Raids Again came out, they also had pretty much the same spines on the Raids Again suit. So it's great to see that, especially with this film being called King of the Monsters, because aside from this film basically being more of a remake, by the looks of it, of Ghidorah the three-headed monster, in name, this one is sort of a predecessor, a spiritual remake of the original. Not really, but you know what I mean. And yeah, so they still kept the spines in this dark color. That's one of the things I would have kind of liked to have seen updated a little more, to add sort of bony highlights, or just any sort of highlights to the tips of the spines, because overall the coloring of the 2014, or I guess since the 2019 now, so just the Legendary Pictures Godzilla, is very dark, very gray, very bland, I'd say, overall, although we do get some nice highlights around the belly on this particular figure. Speaking of the figure, before we get into some of the more dramatic design changes, they've updated the face on the figure, not really in the movie by the looks of it, just in the figure, because the original one was a bit stylized and the face was a bit off. So you can see it quite well here that he does have the snout has sort of been made a little bit more broad shaped, and we got the nostrils are a bit more clear and defined, which is cool to see. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of Godzilla having this type of face. It's much too reptile-like for me. I've never thought of Godzilla as being particularly reptilian, actually, which is kind of an odd thing to say if you don't really know where I'm coming from. But I'll explain all this in that other upcoming video that I'll have, talking about my feelings about the 2014 design and why I don't really connect with it all that much. But that said, this design has got me super excited, especially with the updates to the spines, and even more so the updates to the feet. You can see here the feet have been vastly improved. One of the things about the 2014 design that I absolutely hated, even though I actually liked the design of the 2014 one, just not as Godzilla, just going off this design, they've fixed the one element which I disliked about that one even as a design, not even as a Godzilla design, just the really crappy elephant feet that they gave that design. They've actually given him claws this time, and it looks really good. A big improvement over that original idea. Now, it's not too different. You can still see the sort of same structure, but it's just done subtly enough, but it makes the biggest difference here. You've got 3 big claws that you've got going on here, and a 4th sort of smaller one on the outer edges. And it kind of harkens back to the Showa Godzilla, where he did have 3 big claws. He didn't have the 4th sort of smaller one, but it's kind of a cool throwback to see like the 3 main claws at the front to the Godzilla that we got from Godzilla vs. Kong to Terror of Mechagodzilla during the Showa era. So I think that's a really nice change, and they look, nice and sharp, and they're not clumped together anymore. They're outspread, so it actually looks like the kind of feet you'd see on Godzilla. So that's, for me at least, this is the best change they've done to the design. And another small thing about this design is they did round off the tip of the tail. Now, I didn't even mention this in any of my criticisms about the 2014 design earlier on. I haven't really put many into video form, going in depth, but, I've had lots of talks on Facebook and the various Godzilla groups of people about this way back in the day. And, yeah, those were fun times. But I never even mentioned that because it was such a nitpick at the time. But, yeah, I was never a big fan of the thin little pointy tail tip that they gave him. But it was also something that, in all honesty, compared to other issues I had with the design, didn't bother me enough to warrant mentioning. But it's cool that they did do that little change on this design. So he does have that more classic rounded tail tip. He's got the classic spines, looking very bulky, very rough, and very big, which I'm glad they made them a bit bigger because it does look a bit more grandiose, gives this Godzilla some more heft, weight, and presence to him, I'd say, than the earlier design. But they did keep, it's a nice sort of middle ground between the original 2014 look and a more classic looking Godzilla. How he'll look in the film is still, just going by the trailers, he still looked very 2014-ish, especially from the front. They might have made his arms even bigger, which looks a little strange, but maybe not. Hard to tell, really. Still got that sort of bear-like stance. But yeah, overall, for the Godzilla redesign here, the little changes that they've done here, I think it's great. I like the throwback to like the Showa series, or actually every series. They always would come out with a slightly modified suit with every other film, and Godzilla would just evolve throughout the films without much notice being brought up in the actual continuity of the film. So one film he would look almost totally different to another, but the characters would always still recognize him as Godzilla. It was just something that happened. So it's kind of cool to see those updates still happening here. So, what monster should we talk about next? I'm going to talk about Rodan because I really like this redesign, actually. Out of all of these new redesigns, this one absolutely is the best, the best of them, I'd say. He's a really good medium of various previous incarnations of Rodan. He looks very much like Rodan. He doesn't look like they've tried to turn him into a real pterodactyl or pterodon type sort of design like what he was based off. He looks more like a more, how would you put it, a modern cinematic interpretation of Rodan, maybe with some vulture-like features and sort of some, even magma-like features in the texturing of his wings and stuff like that, which is kind of odd, but yeah. I really like this interpretation's face in particular. It really harkens back to the original Rodan, because the original Rodan is by far my favorite incarnation of Rodan. He just had that mean look to his face, very expressive, very cool looking, and very unique design to him. And this one harkens back to that quite a bit, and as much so, maybe even a little more, to the 2004 design from Godzilla Final Wars, which is incidentally my second favorite incarnation of Rodan. I'm not actually a big fan of the 90s one, where they did kind of try and simplify the design and make him smaller and look a little bit more like an actual Pterodon. This one's similar in posture, just body shape to that one, but it's actually with the sort of very big upper body and the sort of slant of its neck and head, kind of reminds me quite a bit of a vulture, more so than the posture of that one in particular. Another really cool thing about this design is look at the detail and texturing on the wings. It's really bizarre, and it looks very reminiscent of sort of volcanic lava flows, and it's kind of got a rocky feathering to it, if that makes sense. But yeah, from what I've seen in the trailers and everything, this Rodan is looking really cool, and I'm the most excited to see this one in the film, because Rodan's one of those kaijus that seems like he's a little underrepresented in, you know, the Godzilla fandom, or just like when Toho wants to bring in the cash, they always go for Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. Those are their big three. And, you know, we're getting those in this film. But Rodan's like the second tier sort of one. He's like there in there with Anguirus and Gigan and those sort of other kaiju, which are also really famous. But I feel like they have a little bit less, the more fan favorite kind of ones than like the ones that the general public really know about. So it's really cool to see Rodan getting a spot here. I wish we got Anguirus or Baragon or something like that showing up in this film again. It kind of reminds me of GMK, where originally they were going to have Varan and Anguirus in the roles of which were replaced by King Ghidorah and Mothra. And I would have much rather have had the original Varan and Anguirus in those roles, because out of the original kaiju that were meant to be facing off of Godzilla, the only one that I really loved in that film was Baragon. And I feel like that might happen a little bit in this film, where we're getting Mothra and King Ghidorah, but the one that I'm actually really keen to see is Rodan. And yeah, it's just really cool sculpt on this guy. He's got, you know, these really cool scales going down his body, so he's kind of bird-like, but also very reptilian, which is looking really cool here. Very mean looking. I love that. Hopefully, it's kind of hard to tell about it if he has those like belly spikes that, you know, Rodan is known for, but he's kind of got that going here on the side, if you can see. But the little stand does make it look like you can't really tell if he's got that going down the belly. I really love the legs here. I don't know if he'd be able to stand this figure, because the legs do look really small. He might be kind of like the original Fire Rodan that we got. That one didn't stand particularly well. It needed like a weird stand that you had to awkwardly get into stand upright. But so mostly he would be posed in a flying form. I feel like this one's gonna have the same thing going on. The figure, size-wise, I think is smaller than you know, Godzilla and King Ghidorah. Like it's not like man in a suit kind of scaling like you would have in the original film. So they generally do make their flying kaiju a little smaller. Unfortunately, I think it will be cool to see this guy kind of in a bigger figure. Here he looks like he's going to be approximately the size of the Rodan that we got, the Fire Rodan, but maybe a little bit of a wider wingspan. You can see him here next to that display base. So that's pretty cool. So I'm definitely going to pick up this Rodan when it comes out, no matter what. And I also really want the Godzilla. Granted, I want all of these figures, but these two in particular, going by my estimations of the price, these two will be the ones that I will definitely be getting. Yeah, so Rodan, I'm absolutely loving this design. It's kind of a shame. I wish he was getting his own standalone film, to be honest, because the original Rodan was a great film, and I'd love to see a reinterpretation of that. But oh well, I guess he's still going to be coming in of a volcano, looking by the trailers and everything. So it'll be close enough to like a really rushed version of that film. Anyway, we have two more kaiju left to explore, so without further ado, let's get into Mothra, because I'm going to be leaving King Ghidorah for last here, because he's the biggest and grandest of them all, I guess. Now, Mothra is where my feelings about these designs go from positive to what the actual fuck. That was my initial thoughts when I saw this design. With every other one of these kaiju, it was a pretty positive response. But the moment I saw Mothra, I got really concerned. Now, I don't mind a redesign or anything like that, but I feel like this particular redesign kind of loses the idea of Mothra. One thing about Mothra that I really love is that she really stands out as a unique kaiju because she has that sort of cute aspect to her. She's always had that feminine, cute aspect that's really unseen with any other kaiju, and yet she's loved all over the world for this is one of the main reasons, as well as, just her backstory behind her, all the mystical stuff, and just what a cool kaiju she is conceptually. But visually, my least favorite interpretations of Mothra have always been the ones that have tried to make her look the most sort of creepy or and gone the furthest away from that original sort of very fluffy look. And such as the what was it called? The GMK version of her has to this date been my least favorite version of her, because it was the most sort of insectoid and delved the furthest from that original feel of the character. And I was hoping that they would go with because I knew they weren't gonna just do a straight up Mothra for this design, because it's an American studio and they need to Americanize everything, such as they did with Godzilla, making him look all reptilian and stuff. But this design of her was really far from what I was hoping for as a redesign. At worst I was hoping that they would do like a straight up hyper realistic giant moth that would just look exactly like a normal moth but giant. And I was bracing myself for that. So when this design showed up, I was just, at first I didn't know what to think, because the actual, I'll talk about the positives. The wing design is actually really cool looking. The wing shape, I was off-put by it at first, but I actually don't mind it at all. The wing design, aside from looking more like Batra's wings, in fact, this whole design would be perfect for a redesign of Batra, but as a Mothra design, it doesn't really suit me, but yeah, I like the wing pattern. It looks really cool. I'm really excited to see what that'll look like in the film. I like her, her eye color, and and yeah, I can't think of any more positives. Pretty much my thoughts about this design is it looks like a cross between Batra and a Muto, and a lot of people say a praying mantis, but I think more of a deer or some sort of four-legged animal, because the legs on this thing is really where I'm upset with this design, because it looks like it does have 6 legs. There's some small ones just under the main arms near the body, but if you just look at it from most angles, it looks like it has 4 legs. It really reminds me of like a deer, or even like in like the whole sort of body structure with the body shape here and the head. It reminds me of the alien newborn from Alien Resurrection, which is a hideous creature in its own right, and it's so far from what I think of when I think of Mothra. Now, most people have been saying, oh, now she can do like close combat, and they're all happy about this, but that's never really been what Mothra has done. I think they could have made her be able to do close combat in a lot more other interesting ways than by giving her these giant Muto claws. And what else? I wouldn't even mind sort of larger legs if they were spaced out properly. They seem to have her hind legs on her, not on her thorax, but on her abdomen, which is not how insects have their legs. And that's why one of the big reasons this looks really unsettling. Also, they've made her head look really weird. It's like this weird sort of diamond shape, these smaller eyes to the front, and like it's really hard to tell in this figure because this is such a small figure. You can see by the stand that her body is tiny, so the majority of it is these wings and these very large legs. I think if you proportion this out a little better, make the legs smaller, and move the hind legs onto the thorax, this will be a much better design, and I would actually be a big fan of it. This one, I'm really sort of saddened that they've done this because I'm a big fan of Mothra, and this does not give me connotations of Mothra at all. Rodan looks absolutely like Rodan. Godzilla has some great new throwbacks in it that they've done in these updates, and we'll go into King Ghidorah in a second, and we'll get into my thoughts about that one. But I can tell you right away that compared to my nitpicks about King Ghidorah, my thoughts about this thing are far more concerning. But we'll have to wait and see. We still have the Mothra lava that we saw bits of in the trailer that we haven't really seen in full, so I'm curious to see what that one looks like. Will it look just like a caterpillar, I guess? Or will it be like a weird Muto caterpillar? Who knows? I'm kind of guessing that perhaps they're trying to connect Mothra's origins to the Mutos, just by looking at this design, which is a bit of a shame, because I'm not that big a fan of the Mutos. I mean, I think they were one of the best parts of the first film, just because their love story was one of the more intriguing parts of the movie after the lead died in the first half hour, and then Godzilla basically comes and destroys them, even though they were like the ones I was almost rooting for by that point, but whatever. But I still wasn't that big a fan of them, especially sort of design-wise. So yeah, that's sort of my thoughts about Mothra. I'm not a fan at this point, but I'm optimistic enough that I'm still gonna hold off until I see the film before I have my full thoughts. Maybe they'll make it work with her origin and her personality and all that. I did hear that the Mothra song should be in the movie, so that's hopeful. So yeah, that's enough about about Mothra. Let's get into the big guy here, King Ghidorah. So, first off, very, very striking design, very reminiscent of the classic Ghidorah. They did do the things with the design that I was kind of hoping they wouldn't do, but I knew they would do it because obviously they were going to, which is make it more dragon-like, give it more, like, dragon-like wings, give it dragon-like heads, similar to that of, like, Smaug from, the Hobbit trilogy that was out recently, a couple of years back, and give it more sort of dinosaur or bird-like legs and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I really wanted them to do something a little bit more original, because King Ghidorah has, it is a dragon, but it's always been very different from, like, a westernized dragon, and a lot of, my issues and nitpicks of all of these characters come from their sort of westernization and the Hollywood, the way they made them sort of Hollywoodized. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Like, they're all things that I was expecting them to do, just because it seemed, rather than actual creativity going behind it, it just seemed like the thing that they had to do. But I do actually like this design overall. It looks really cool, especially just this figure looks huge and really imposing. I mean, it looks really awkward with these stands holding up the wings. But at least it's a good sign that he may not be walking on his wings, which was one of my biggest fears about this design. Because that would have really pushed it over the edge if he did walk on his wings. Because something about the King Ghidorah walking on his wings really deducts from like his originality, like I was saying, and because it's such a like westernized thing for dragons to do, especially ones with no arms, and that it just makes him feel less grand, because as opposed to having these huge wings just sort of just behind him, making him look really big and bald. If he's just sort of clawing on the ground with them, it really it feels really unimpressive, and I don't really like the idea of King Ghidorah in particular doing that. And the fact that these wings seem to be one piece. Because normally MonsterArts, they try and figure out ways of making the wings move, and they've tried it in different ways, like with the Destroyer figure, as well as the Rodan figure with those weird hinges, and they just sort of gave up with it on some figures. Like, well, I guess they didn't even need to do it on Mothra, because she didn't really articulate her wings down the middle. But, you know, even on the, and like on the King Ghidorah ones previously, they've had them in just one piece. And, you know, that sort of symbolized that they didn't really flap. Like use their wings like arms or anything. So these ones seem to be one piece, and maybe it's just because they couldn't figure out a decent way of articulating them, or they just knew that in the movie he wasn't going to be walking around on his wings, which I'm hoping for the most. So the shape of these wings, they did change them and make them look more bat-like, as opposed to sort of the open fan type wings that we had from the original designs of King Ghidorah. But they did sort of keep elements of the fan-like design of these wings. In the bottom parts of the wings closer to the body, they have like I don't know what you'd call them, but the bits of the bony parts down the middle of the wings spidering out from the side of the body and holding out the membranes. And that part of it does look reminiscent of the original King Ghidorah, but then at the very top you got these more arm-like wings that open up like bat wings. So they kind of merged the two together, which I think is a nice touch. Personally, I would have preferred if they just gave this King Ghidorah just fan wings that didn't really have arm-like elements to them that made them flap. I know it would have been hard to make work in a sort of hyper-realistic type sense, but I think they could have done it if they put a little bit more ingenuity and creativity into the design. Now, the scaling and the color and all of that looks really good. I like the darker highlights around the base of the wings there. The gold looks really cool, especially in some of these photos where you can really tell that it's gold. And the scaling looks really nice. I love the scaling down the necks. The necks look really cool. They look like they'd articulate really well. They're nice and thick and very imposing on this figure. Now, the legs look a bit weird because they slimmed down King Ghidorah, especially around the middle of his body, and so it gave him more sort of chicken-like legs, more bird-like legs, and you know, I knew they were going to do that because obviously they were, but it does also lend to him looking more generic dragon-like, and it works out okay. I'm not the biggest fan of them doing that to King Ghidorah's legs. I think they could have made them a little bit more bulky, give him a bit more bulk around the middle of the body, which helps make King Ghidorah look a little bit more imposing, I'd say. But I think for what it is, it's okay. It does look a little weird, though, because I think his claws are also, like, solid gold. I know the original ones were, but I thought it might have looked cool if they, you know, added some color variety here and there. Let's talk about the tails. I really like the tails because they kept them basically identical to, like, the Heisei design here, at least by the looks of it. And, yeah, so the tails and necks are very authentic to the original King Ghidorah design. Now, let's get to the face of this kaiju. So, he has very robust-looking bony heads with big bony crown-like horns on each head. Each head also looks identical, at least from what we see here. Which is interesting because I did hear that King Ghidorah was going to have, each of the heads were going to have its own personality and be unique, so I was interested to see if they would make each head look a little bit different, which would have been kind of cool, but it looks like they're going to be identical, so I guess the differences will be purely in personality, so I'm wondering how they're going to execute that in the film. The only major difference is the two side heads only have one row of spikes going down the back of the neck, and the middle head has two, which is a cool little idea. They do have a really cool design here, but they do kind of look Smaug-like. I wish they would have gone with maybe giving them the crescent moon sort of horn they had in the original design that goes on the middle of the head, or giving them more mammalian sort of like Eastern dragon type noses, like you would see in like a Chinese dragon or something like that, which was kind of more what the original Ghidorah had. I think that would have made this design look far more King Ghidorah-like and less like a generic dragon. But overall, I'm pretty much nitpicking about this design at this point because I was fearing much worse. Like I said, I was fearing that the wings would be walking on the wings, and that they might have given it even more generic sort of dragon-like faces. And for what it's worth, this design looks pretty impressive. It looks like a really grand sort of design. From the back, it looks really nice as well, as you can see here. And overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm actually really excited to see it in the movie. So far, we've only seen it in silhouette. Both in the first trailer and in those like little teaser sneak peeks that have been coming out, and the second trailer is probably going to be up by the time that this video is up anyway. So I'm filming this like the day before that's due to drop. Overall, I'm pretty happy with King Ghidorah, but still a little disappointed that they did make the design a little bit generic. I was hoping that it would be something a little bit more original. But oh well, it's close, it's good enough. Like, I saw a great meme the other day where it was, the first picture was a picture of the Heisei Godzilla, like a figure of it, and then somebody pressing a button saying upgrade, and then there was a picture of the anime King Ghidorah, and then they pressed a button saying, oh no, go back. And then the third one is this King Ghidorah, and they're like, good enough. So that's kind of my feelings about this design. I was fearing the worst, and they did a pretty good job with it. So, overall, in rating these from best to worst, I'd say Rodan by far my favorite of these new redesigns. The updates they've done to the Godzilla design put it at number 2 for me, because I really love the updates they've done. Still not the biggest fan of this particular design, but I'm so hyped for the changes they've made to this one that it's just made me really happy. And the third one is King Ghidorah. I think they made him a bit generic and did some predictable design alterations, which I just knew Hollywood couldn't resist doing because But it's still a cool design, and the figure looks amazing, so it's still pretty high up there. And then way down the line, I've got Mothra, where I'm just really disappointed in what they've done with this, with what was such a really cool kaiju design. I just really wish they would shrink those legs. That's just the main thing for me, but I know it doesn't bother some people, and it's just a matter of personal opinion, so oh well. And just to close you guys off, this is an official picture released by Tamashii Nations, I think, that you're seeing right now, and that is all the designs scaled up together, which looks really cool. I like the scaling here, so I think this is how the figures would scale up together. So obviously, King Ghidorah is a pretty standard size next to Godzilla, but his wings are absolutely massive, and I know this figure is going to be huge, so whether I can get my hands on it or not, time will only tell. Fingers crossed that I can, but who knows at this point. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you didn't mind this sort of different style of video. I did try and put this one up earlier. I did record an earlier version of this that wasn't recorded, that wasn't just a voiceover. It had a little clip of me in the corner going through the pictures on my computer like I do with some of my videos, but it was really the quality of that video was really low for some reason. It was laggy, so I wasn't going to upload that, so I'm just redoing this now, so that's why this video is coming out a bit late. And yeah, be sure to check out the upcoming video that I'll be doing on my thoughts on the 2014 design, because I've had some, in my previous trailer analysis videos for King of the Monsters, I've had some, interesting comments about people being confused about my thoughts about the 2014 design, because I basically stated that I like it as a design, but not as a Godzilla design, and, people were like, what the hell are you talking about? So I thought that would be a really interesting video to talk about, because I feel like I have some pretty specific and unique views on that I haven't heard addressed too much. So yeah, be sure to check that out. I hope you liked this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and all that jazz. And yeah, may all your vinyl be radiated vinyl. Over and out.